The air in the American Forum auditorium crackled with an almost palpable tension, thick and heavy like the calm before a hurricane. Above, a constellation of blazing lights bore down on the circular stage, transforming the polished floor into a gladiatorial arena, a modern-day coliseum awaiting its combatants. The vibrant hum of anticipation, a low, guttural growl, echoed through the vast space, a chaotic symphony of murmurs, hushed whispers, and the occasional defiant cheer that pierced the collective unease. This was no ordinary talk show. This was the crucible where ideologies would clash, where glittering legacies would be forged or shattered under the unforgiving glare of a nation's gaze. Thunderous applause, a wave of fervent, almost fanatical support, mixed with sharp, cutting boos, creating an atmosphere that was both electrifying and deeply unsettling. A volatile cocktail of adoration and animosity. The stage lights, like predatory eyes, gently swept over the audience, illuminating a stark, undeniable ideological divide. On one side, a sea of crimson, a vibrant, unyielding tide where MAGA supporters held high banners proclaiming, "Protect our kids," their faces etched with a fierce, unyielding resolve, their eyes blazing with conviction. On the other, a calmer yet equally determined expanse of blue, where Democratic voters clutched signs reading, "Love is all." Their expressions a mix of hopeful defiance and growing apprehension. Stepping into this maelstrom, two figures emerged, each a titan in her own right, yet diametrically opposed, destined for a collision course. First, Karoline Leavitt, the youthful blonde-haired face of the ascendant MAGA movement. Her presence was a jolt of raw, unapologetic energy, a disruptive force in a world accustomed to decorum. Her eyes flashed with a cold, almost predatory, a confidence, hinting at the strategic mind beneath the polished exterior. No one, not a single pundit or seasoned observer, had truly expected this moment, this audacious challenge from a rising star to the glittering, almost untouchable legacy of former President Barack Obama. For over a decade, Obama had been an icon, celebrated by the media, his era painted with inspirational speeches and a narrative of hope, diversity, and social justice. Leavitt, however, embodied a new generation, one determined to tear down any remaining sheen of glory, to expose what she vehemently called a dream detached from America's workers, a vision she saw as fundamentally flawed and harmful. Then, Michelle Obama, the former First Lady, took the stage. She moved with an undeniable, confident poise, a symbol of elegance and progress, who had inspired millions through her Let's Move initiative and her best-selling memoir, Becoming. Her smile, warm yet sharp, carried the immense weight of a woman who had not only shaped American culture, but had come to embody the very essence of the Obama legacy itself, a story woven from threads of hope, diversity, and social justice. She was the embodiment of an era, a beacon of a past that many believed immutable, a fortress of ideals that seemed impregnable. Laura Bennett, the veteran host, a steadfast pillar amid the surging currents of emotion, stepped to the center of the stage. Clad in an elegant dark suit, her demeanor was calm but firm, her commanding gaze sweeping the auditorium before a professional smile touched her lips. "Welcome to American Forum." Her voice rang clear, cutting through the emotional din like an arrow. "Tonight we'll dive into one of the most heated and controversial topics, culture and identity." She paused, letting the stifling air grow heavier, the silence taut as a bowstring, a pregnant pause that amplified the anticipation. The audience realized within minutes that this was no dialogue, no casual conversation, no polite exchange of ideas. This was a true ideological battle, a fight for the very soul of the nation. Karoline Leavitt didn't come to chat, she came to fight. The stage was set, the combatants ready. The first spark was about to ignite, promising an unrelenting clash that would leave one legacy wavering before an opponent who knew only victory. The spotlight, a searing beacon, turned to Michelle Obama, highlighting her composed demeanor and graceful presence. "Mrs. Obama," Laura Bennett began, her voice respectful yet firm, "as someone who has spent years working on education and community programs, please share your perspective on these policies and how we can balance individual rights with society's shared values." Michelle stood, her hands lightly touching the podium, her gaze sweeping over the audience, seeking connection, seeking empathy. "America is strong because of its diversity," she began, her voice warm and deeply persuasive, a familiar cadence that had once captivated millions. "I've met kids in Chicago, isolated because of their identity. Comprehensive education doesn't just teach knowledge, it teaches compassion. We must protect the vulnerable, not push them to the margins." The Democratic side erupted in applause, a wave of relief washing over them, some holding up signs reading "Justice for All." But among the MAGA crowd, murmurs of discontent spread like wildfire, a low, guttural rumble that threatened to drown out the applause. Laura Bennett, sensing the shift, turned to Leavitt, the corner of her mouth curling as if inviting a counterstrike, a challenge to the established order. "Karoline," she prompted, "Mrs. Obama has shared her view. What do you think?" Leavitt, her blonde hair gleaming under the lights, sat upright, her eyes flashing with that same cold, unwavering confidence. She paused for a beat, a master of timing, letting silence envelop the room, making the MAGA audience hold their breath, their anticipation a tangible force. Then she stood, stepping toward the center of the stage with the deliberate stride of a hunter eyeing prey, her gaze locking onto Michelle. "Mrs. Obama, you speak of compassion," Leavitt began, her voice smooth but laced with a hidden blade, a deceptive softness that masked its sharp edge. "But ask the mothers and fathers working tirelessly in Iowa, in Georgia. Do they want their kids learning confusing gender concepts instead of math? I met a parent in Missouri, desperate because their school forced their 11-year-old son to choose pronouns. That's not compassion, that's imposition." The MAGA crowd roared, their cheers crashing like waves against a shore, a thunderous affirmation of her words. Some Democratic spectators bowed their heads, uneasy, the initial flicker of hope dimming. Michelle furrowed her brow, preparing to respond, but Leavitt raised her hand, signaling she wasn't done, a clear assertion of dominance. "You talk about isolated kids. I get it," she continued, her voice suddenly softer, like a strategist setting her trap, drawing her opponent closer before the decisive strike. "But why don't you mention the kids mocked for holding their families' beliefs? Why are you silent when a coach in Arizona is fired for not using new pronouns? Who do you choose, Mrs. Obama, the kids or the activists?" The question was like a spear, piercing straight into Michelle's argument, leaving it exposed and vulnerable. The MAGA audience leapt to their feet, chanting, "Karoline, Karoline," a deafening chorus that seemed to obliterate any lingering doubt. Michelle took a deep breath, trying to regain control, her composure visibly fraying. "Karoline, you're twisting the truth," she replied, her voice still calm but tinged with tension, a fragile shield against the onslaught. "Education is about opening minds, not dividing. I've been to schools, seeing kids find strength when they're accepted. We need a society that unites, not one that fears differences." She looked directly at the audience, seeking empathy, a desperate plea for connection. The Democrats clapped, but the sound was weaker, a faint ripple drowned by the surging MAGA momentum. Leavitt didn't let Michelle breathe. Her eyes blazed like fire, seeing the opening, sensing the kill. "Opening minds," she shot back, her voice rising, dripping with sarcasm. "You call forcing 9-year-olds to learn about gender identity. Opening minds? According to Pew Research, 65% of American parents want schools to focus on academics, not ideology. They're not the enemy, Mrs. Obama. They're the ones raising kids. Are you with them or with the corporations pushing wokeness? The mega crowd erupted, waving banners that read, "Parents First." Some Democratic spectators shook their heads, silent, a sense of defeat beginning to spread through their ranks. Michelle, her gaze still steady, tried to hold her ground. "Karoline, you're stoking division," she said, her voice firmer now, a desperate attempt to regain the narrative. "I don't represent any corporation. I represent those pushed to the margins, those who need to be heard. Education doesn't impose. It offers a chance to understand each other." She turned to the audience, hoping to reignite support, to rekindle the empathy that had once been her strength. But only a small corner clapped, their sound faint, swallowed, by the growing roar of MAGA boos that overwhelmed, causing her to falter briefly, a visible tremor in her otherwise composed demeanor. Leavitt smiled, a cold, knowing smile, as if she'd anticipated Michelle's every move, every defensive maneuver. "A chance," she repeated, her voice dropping, laced with mockery, a venomous whisper that carried across the auditorium. "Who are you giving a chance to? The activists writing textbooks or the workers left behind?" The question hung in the air, a perfectly aimed dart. "I know a teacher in Nevada, fired for refusing to teach fourth graders about transgender issues. You call that justice, Mrs. Obama?" The question was a knockout blow, leaving Michelle momentarily stunned, her carefully constructed composure shattered. Laura Bennett interjected, her voice charged with excitement, sensing the dramatic shift. "Mrs. Obama, Miss Leavitt has raised a big issue. How do you respond?" The spotlight bore down on Michelle, a harsh, unforgiving beam, as if exposing every weakness, every crack in her armor. She took a deep breath, trying to regain her composure, to find the words that would stem the tide. "I believe in dialogue," she said, her voice deliberate, each word carefully chosen. "We can protect kids and respect diversity. I've seen schools unite when people listen to each other." But her words lacked force, overshadowed by Leavitt's relentless onslaught, a verbal barrage that left no room for nuance or empathy. Leavitt didn't wait. She turned to the audience, raising her hand like an orator conquering the crowd, a general claiming victory on the battlefield. "Americans are fed up with wokeness forced on their kids," she declared, her voice resounding, each syllable a hammer blow. "According to Rasmussen reports, 70% of voters want schools to teach skills, not ideology. Mrs. Obama, do you hear their voices, or are you too caught up with the DC elite?" The final line was a blade, cutting deep into Michelle's stance, leaving her exposed. The MAGA crowd exploded, shouts of "Karoline" echoing through the room, a deafening roar of triumph. The stage lights dimmed, but the studio atmosphere remained molten, like a furnace, the embers of conflict burning brighter than ever. Laura Bennett stepped forward, the light casting her shadow like a blade across the stage, a silent acknowledgement of the shift in power. The studio quieted, but still burned like embers waiting to be reignited. She scanned the crowd, her gaze cutting through the undercurrents. "Thank you for those candid, profound, and emotional insights about how we shape who we are and who gets to rewrite those stories," she said, her voice low but resonant, like metal beneath each word. "But identity isn't just personal. It's also shaped by what's prioritized and what's left behind in the national budget." She paused, letting the stifling air grow heavier. The light now framed Michelle Obama's face, highlighting her sculpted calm, a fragile mask. From Obamacare to community programs, the Trump administration is making deep cuts. Mrs. Obama, as someone who stood at the heart of these policies, what do you think of this direction? The battle had shifted, but the intensity remained, promising another devastating exchange. The tension in the American Forum auditorium was a living entity, a suffocating blanket that pressed down on every soul present. Laura Bennett, a steadfast pillar amid the raging storm, stood at the stage's center, her presence commanding, her gaze piercing through the undercurrents of emotion. The lights highlighted her face, accentuating the sharp, almost predatory presence of a host navigating one of the fiercest debates on television today, without shouting or exaggerating, with just a glance and a well-timed pause. She held the pulse of the entire room, a master conductor of this volatile symphony. She leaned slightly forward, her voice lowering, as if drawing the audience closer into a conspiratorial whisper. "The question is," she began, her words resonating with a profound weight, "after all the arguments, the differences and the clashes, what is the true mark a president leaves on this nation?" She paused, letting the stifling air grow heavier. The silence taut as a bowstring, amplifying the profound nature of her inquiry. Her gaze shifted, first to Michelle Obama, then sweeping to Leavitt, and finally encompassing the entire audience. Is his legacy about numbers, policy changes, or something deeper, something that touches the soul of a nation? The studio fell into a tense silence, a collective holding of breath braced for the final defining confrontation. "Mrs. Obama, please." Michelle gently adjusted her beige silk dress, a small, almost imperceptible gesture, her eyes sweeping the audience, seeking empathy, a desperate plea for connection in the face of the mounting pressure. Her voice, warm and emotional, began to weave a narrative of resilience. "Our legacy is a journey of overcoming," she began, her words a familiar balm, a reminder of past triumphs. "We inherited a nation broken by a financial crisis, the worst since the Great Depression. We didn't just stop the disaster. We created 14 million jobs, saved the auto industry, and brought Obamacare to millions who were desperate, who had nothing." She lifted her head, her gaze sweeping the room, trying to rekindle the collective memory of struggle and triumph. "I met a farmer in Iowa who said that because of us, his family no longer feared bankruptcy from illness. That's a legacy of unity and hope. That's what we built." The Democratic side erupted in applause, a surging heartbeat revived amid a fiery battle line, some holding up signs reading, "Obama is pride." But boos from the MAGA crowd quickly cut in, a harsh guttural roar, as if to snuff out every spark of that cherished legacy, to obliterate any defense. Laura Bennett, her eyes like a hawk's, turned to Leavitt, her gaze inviting a fatal blow, a decisive strike that would seal the fate of the debate. "Karoline, Mrs. Obama just defended her legacy. How do you respond?" Leavitt, her blonde hair gleaming under the lights, sat upright, her eyes flashing with a confidence sharp as a blade. She paused for a moment, letting silence envelop the room, making the MAGA audience hold their breath, their anticipation a tangible force. Then she stood, striding to the center of the stage with a commanding presence, her gaze locking onto Michelle like a strategist, ready to deliver the decisive strike. "Mrs. Obama, you talk about unity," Leavitt began, her voice smooth but laced with biting sarcasm, a venomous sweetness that masked its sharp edge. "But ask the coal miners in West Virginia who lost their jobs under your administration. Did they feel hope? I met a miner in Kentucky who said that during the Obama era, all he saw were factory closures and mounting bills. You call that a legacy?" Michelle opened her mouth to speak, a flicker of defiance in her eyes, but Leavitt gave her no chance, no moment to breathe. Without asking permission or waiting for a cue, she charged forward like a cavalryman storming through an opponent's gap, relentless and unforgiving. "Let's look at reality," Leavitt said, her voice ringing out like a bronze bell in the fiery auditorium, each word a declaration. She wasn't just speaking. She was stepping into the role of a classic orator, a general rallying her troops. Each word, each cadence aimed straight at the crowd's psyche, designed to dismantle, to destroy. Under Obama, average GDP growth was just 1.8%, according to the Commerce Department's own data. Trump, he hit 3.1% before the pandemic struck and, in his first 3 years, created over 6.5 million jobs. She took a step toward the stands, her hand raised as if sealing the truth, an undeniable testament to her claims. Trump slashed thousands of regulations, unleashing businesses, saving them over $200 billion. Numbers straight from the Council of Economic Advisors, not words, but results, not hope, but action. She spun back, facing Michelle directly, her eyes blazing with conviction. So tell me, Mrs. Obama, with all those numbers, do you still want Americans to believe your legacy is the superior one? The question, delivered with the force of a missile, shot straight into the core of Michelle's yet-to-form argument, leaving her exposed and vulnerable. The studio erupted. The MAGA section exploded in feverish excitement, a red wave flooding the stage. They leapt to their feet, waving blazing red banners, chanting like thunder, "Trump! Trump! Trump!" Amid the flickering lights, Michelle sat there, silent, her eyes tracking Leavitt, as if weighing a counterstrike that could turn the entire chessboard, a desperate search for an opening that wasn't there. Michelle took a deep breath, her gaze remained steady, but beneath her calm exterior, a quiet tension emerged, a palpable tremor of the ground beneath her feet. Michelle clenched her hands, a subtle tightening that betrayed the immense pressure she was under. She didn't back down, not yet. "Karoline, you're trying to tell half the story," she responded, her voice firm, each word meshing like steel gears, a desperate attempt to reassert control. "You ignore the context. You forget that we didn't just rebuild the economy. We tried to build a fairer, more inclusive America where no one is left behind." She paused, then spoke slowly, decisively, her gaze sweeping the audience, a final plea for understanding. "Obamacare, though not perfect, saved millions of lives. That's our legacy, not just numbers, people." The Democratic audience began to stir, their applause surging like a heartbeat, revived amid a fiery battle line, a faint echo of support against the overwhelming tide. Leavitt smiled, a cold, knowing smile, as if she'd anticipated every move, every last-ditch effort. "Fairness," she shot back, her voice soaring, dripping with mockery, a venomous echo that filled the room. "You call raising taxes on the middle class fairness? According to the Tax Foundation, Obama policies added $500 billion in taxes on workers. Trump, on the other hand, cut $1.5 trillion in taxes, putting money back into 85% of families per the IRS. I met a nurse in Arizona who said thanks to Trump, she could buy her first home. Mrs. Obama, do you want future generations to bear the debt of your legacy?" The question was a punch, leaving Michelle stunned, reeling from the relentless assault. The MAGA audience stood, their applause like thunder, a deafening roar of triumph. Some Democratic spectators began leaving their seats, disillusioned, a sense of defeat spreading through the room like a cold front. Laura looked at Michelle, her voice suddenly sharp and charged with excitement, sensing the final act of this brutal drama. "Mrs. Obama, Miss Leavitt just presented powerful numbers. Do you have a response?" The stage lights converged, bearing down on Michelle, as if exposing every remaining weakness, every vulnerability. She took a deep breath, trying to reclaim her signature poise, her eyes calm but unable to hide a fleeting tension, a flicker of vulnerability. "A legacy isn't just about numbers or the economy," she began, her voice deliberate, each word carefully measured, a desperate attempt to shift the focus, to redefine the terms of engagement. "A legacy is about building a nation where everyone is respected, where they have a chance to succeed regardless of race or background." We did that, and I'm proud of what we achieved." She paused, her gaze resolute, like a wall standing firm. Against Leavitt's pressure, a final, unyielding stand. But Leavitt wouldn't relent. She took another step, her face brimming with determination, the glint of victory in her eyes growing sharper, more pronounced. Without giving Michelle a moment to breathe, she turned to the audience, raising her hand like a leader claiming triumph, a general surveying her conquered territory. "Americans don't want a legacy of debt and failure," her voice boomed, each word a blow to the audience's psyche, a resonant declaration of war. According to Rasmussen reports, 62% of voters say Trump delivered a stronger economy than Obama. Trump built a thriving America. Mrs. Obama left a depleted nation. It's time we face the truth. She paused, flashing a cold smile, her eyes like razor-sharp daggers aimed at Michelle, a silent, deadly threat. "Which legacy do you choose?" Leavitt's final question was a blade swung high, slicing deep into Michelle's stance, leaving the studio's atmosphere stifled, tense to the point of suffocation. The stage now erupted in a fierce wave of emotion, a chaotic symphony of cheers and boos. Blazing lights swept across the impassioned crowd, illuminating faces contorted with fervor and frustration. Amid the seething energy, Laura Bennett stood firm, her eyes gleaming like a commander in the heart of a battlefield, guiding every move, orchestrating the final moments. She raised her hand, a gesture as if touching the audience's every breath, her gaze sparkling as if tracking a gripping political script. "We've witnessed an unrelenting clash of minds," Laura said, her voice calm but laced with excitement, a thrill of witnessing history unfold. "And now, Michelle, how do you feel facing these undeniable numbers and facts? Share with the audience." The lights focused on Michelle, the glow highlighting her sharp features, but also her palpable tension, the visible strain of a battle lost. The entire studio seemed to hold its breath, silent, braced for the final counterattack, a desperate, perhaps futile, last stand. Michelle stood, her hands lightly gripping the edge of her beige silk dress, her eyes scanning the crowd, as if searching for a spark of hope amid the encircling storm, a lifeline in a sea of opposition. She took a deep breath, a weight pressing in her chest, then began, her voice low but slightly faltering, as if battling her own unease, the cracks in her composure finally showing. "Immigration is the soul of America," she started, her voice softer, a desperate attempt to pivot but striving to hold its ground. "We built a nation where everyone has a chance. I met an immigrant family in California. They worked hard, hoping only for their children to attend college, to have a better future. Deportation orders are tearing these families apart, and I believe that's a betrayal of the values we've always cherished. We need humane reform, not oppression." Michelle paused as if awaiting the audience's reaction, but the democratic applause came only faintly, sporadic and weak, a dying echo. Meanwhile, the MAGA boos swiftly overpowered, crashing into Michelle like waves of anger, making her feel the crushing weight of the pressure, the undeniable force of public opinion turning against her. Laura Bennett turned to Leavitt, her eyes alight, as if inviting a decisive blow, the final crushing strike. "Karoline, Mrs. Obama just called for humane reform. How will you respond?" Leavitt needed no prompting. She lifted her head, her eyes blazing with unwavering confidence, a fire in their depths that mirrored the intensity of the stage lights. Her blonde hair shimmered under the stage lights as she stood, striding to the center with bold, resolute steps, a warrior advancing to claim her spoils. She faced Michelle, her gaze as sharp as a blade, unyielding, unforgiving. "Mrs. Obama," Leavitt began, her voice soft but laced with unmistakable mockery, a chilling sweetness. "You talk about the soul of America, but have you heard of Sarah, Root's family? A 21-year-old girl in Nebraska killed by an illegal immigrant. Did they feel that soul? I met Sarah's mother. She got no justice from this administration. You call that values? Michelle prepared to respond, her mouth opening, a flicker of renewed defiance in her eyes. But Leavitt gave her no moment to breathe, no quarter. "Let's look at reality," she said, her voice rising like a warrior commanding the battlefield, each word a declaration, a pronouncement. Illegal immigration costs $116 billion a year, according to the Federation for American Immigration Reform. While you talk about a family in California, millions of Americans are paying the price for lax border policies. Trump is protecting them with deportation orders. Mrs. Obama, whose side are you on? Leavitt's question pierced through Michelle's arguments like an arrow, striking true, leaving them shattered. The MAGA crowd erupted, standing and chanting, "Borders, borders, borders," as if to obliterate any defense from her. The hashtag Leavitt Slays began climbing the X trending charts, a digital roar, mirroring the one in the auditorium, and Michelle felt the pressure mounting by the second, a suffocating weight. She took a deep breath, her gaze steady but unable to hide the tension, the subtle tremor that ran through her. "Karoline, you use pain to divide," Michelle replied, her voice striving for calm but noticeably sharper, a thin, strained thread of composure. "Immigration isn't black and white. I met an immigrant doctor in Texas who saved hundreds of lives during the pandemic. Deportation orders don't discriminate, and they're tearing communities apart. We need a fair system, not violence." She looked directly at the audience, hoping to rekindle some empathy, to find a sympathetic ear. But the democratic applause sounded feeble, a dying gasp, seemingly drowned out by the surging MAGA fervor. Leavitt gave Michelle no time to breathe, no space to recover. She leaned forward, a mocking smile flickering across her lips. "Fair," she repeated, her voice dropping, heavy with contempt, dripping with disdain. "You call letting 2 million illegal immigrants cross the border each year fair? According to Customs and Border Protection, 70% of them are linked to crime. I met a police officer in Arizona attacked by an illegal immigrant. Mrs. Obama, do you tell him that's community?" Leavitt's words landed like a punch to Michelle's core, a brutal, unyielding blow. The MAGA crowd exploded in cheers, waving "Protect America" banners, a sea of red triumph. The raucous, fervent noise seemed to stagger Michelle, visibly shaking her. Some Democratic spectators bowed their heads, unable to face the moment, a sense of palpable defeat spreading through the room, a cold, creeping despair. Michelle tried to regain her footing, but the resolve in her eyes now wavered slightly, a flicker of doubt in what had once been an unshakable gaze. "Karoline, you exaggerate to sow fear," she said, her voice firmer but unable to mask her disadvantage, the undeniable fact of her losing ground. "Most immigrants are hard-working people who contribute greatly to this country. We need reform to protect them and maintain security. I've seen communities stand strong when we work together." She turned back, hoping to rally support from the audience, but only a small corner clapped, their sound faint amid the MAGA boos. The growing opposition visibly shook Michelle, as if her every effort was dissolving in the tense atmosphere, her words evaporating into the charged air. Leavitt smiled, a triumphant, almost predatory grin, as if she'd anticipated every move, every desperate counter. "Community," she countered, her voice soaring, dripping with mockery. "You call letting cities like Chicago drown in crime a community? According to the Justice Department, 40% of violent crime in major cities is linked to illegal immigrants. Trump is cleaning up that mess while Mrs. Obama defends failed policies. I met a mother in New Mexico who lost her son in a crash caused by an illegal immigrant. Mrs. Obama, do you want her to believe in your reform?" The question was a blow, leaving Michelle stunned, her face a mask of disbelief. The MAGA audience stood, their applause like thunder, a deafening roar of victory. Some Democratic spectators began leaving their seats, disillusioned, unable to bear witness to the unfolding defeat. Laura interjected, her voice charged with excitement. "Mrs. Obama, Miss Leavitt just made a powerful argument. How do you respond?" The spotlight bore down on Michelle as if exposing every weakness, every remaining vulnerability. She took a deep breath, trying to regain her composure, to find a final, desperate answer. "I believe in a compassionate America," she said, her voice deliberate, each word carefully chosen. "We can secure the border without tearing families apart. Reform is the right path." But her words lacked force, overshadowed by Leavitt's relentless onslaught, a faint whisper against a hurricane. The Democrats clapped sporadically, a dying effort, while MAGA continued to roar, their triumph undeniable. Leavitt didn't stop. "Americans want safety, not empty promises," she declared, her voice booming, filling the entire auditorium. According to the Center for Immigration Studies, 75% of voters support deporting illegal immigrants. Trump listens to them, but Mrs. Obama doesn't. Which values do you choose? Laura Bennett stood center stage, her gaze sharp like an observer of victory, a silent acknowledgement of the undeniable outcome. She looked at Michelle once more, a fleeting moment of what might have been pity, then turned to Leavitt, posing. The final question, the coronation. "Karoline, Mrs. Obama showed remarkable resilience, but it's clear tonight this confrontation has been decided. What do you have to say about your victory?" Leavitt stood, her eyes resolute, a faint but confident smile on her face, a warrior basking in the glow of triumph. "Thank you, Laura. Tonight I just want to say one thing. Americans need bold decisions, not empty words. I stand here not just to defend my values, but for the values the American people truly want. They want safety, they want their country strong, and they want a secure future. Today, I'll keep fighting for them." Leavitt's response was resolute, like a declaration of war, a promise of battles yet to come. The MAGA crowd erupted in cheers, their applause thunderous, showing no sign of relenting, a sustained roar of approval. Michelle stood silently, unable to counter further, her face etched with a quiet weariness, while the audience seemed to have found a clear winner. Leavitt, with the strength of her arguments and her undeniable ability to command the crowd, had completely dominated. The lights dimmed, leaving the stage ablaze with the MAGA audience's fervent applause. The atmosphere in the studio remained electric, vibrating with the echoes of a decisive victory. But backstage, another story unfolded. Karoline Leavitt, her blonde hair still gleaming despite the stage lights fading, strode into the green room. With the confidence of a boxer who just knocked out her opponent, a champion returning to her corner. The MAGA team surrounded her, a swarm of exhilarated faces, tight hugs and triumphant laughter ringing out, a joyous cacophony. "You did it, Karoline!" an aide exclaimed, almost breathless with excitement. Leavitt smiled, her gaze icy but unable to hide her pride, a flicker of satisfaction in her eyes. Her phone buzzed, the screen flashing President Trump. She signaled for silence, pressing the speaker button, and the voice of Donald Trump boomed through, brimming with excitement, a roar of approval that filled the small room. "Karoline, you're a warrior! You showed them how strong MAGA is. America's proud of you." Leavitt responded, her voice smooth but full of pride, a shared victory. "Thank you, sir, Mr. President. This is for the American people, not the elites." The surrounding crowd clapped, some raising fists and shouting, "MAGA!" A Truth Social post from Trump's account spread instantly, a digital wildfire. Karoline Leavitt just taught the world a lesson in MAGA strength, tremendous. Meanwhile, Michelle Obama sat in a quiet corner backstage, dim light casting shadows on her face, her usual poise tinged with weariness, a profound exhaustion. The weight of the evening, the relentless assault, had finally taken its toll. She had fought, she had stood her ground, but tonight the battle was undeniably lost. The American Forum stage may be dark, the cameras off, but the echoes of this ideological clash will reverberate for weeks, months, perhaps even years to come. Tonight, a new force emerged, a clear message was sent, and the political landscape shifted under the weight of an undeniable performance. The battle for the soul of America continues, and tonight, one side landed a decisive blow. Don't miss a single moment of this unfolding story. If you were gripped by the intensity of this debate, if you felt the power of every argument, then make sure to like this video, share it with everyone who needs to hear this truth, and most importantly, comment below with your thoughts. Tell us where you stand. And for more explosive content, for more moments that define our nation's future, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you won't miss the latest stories, the next battle, the next victory. The fight is far from over.